Welcome to Positive Talk Radio. We're glad you're here. I'm Kevin McDonald, your host for this grand adventure, and I thank you for joining us. You see, our mission is to create a positive, personal connection to all things with courage and love. We invite terrific guests, interesting topics, and great conversation, all in a fun, entertaining way. And we always manage to learn something, too. So I hope you will stay right where you are for this episode of Positive Talk Radio. And welcome everybody to another episode of Positive Talk Radio. I hope everybody is well today. It is the first of the year. And so, this is one of those times of the year when you kind of dust off the things that have bothered you for a long time, and it's a new opportunity to fix things and to get things going in the right direction. And given that, we've invited a wonderful gal who's going to be able to help you potentially do that. Her name is Jenifer, and if I screw this up, I apologize completely. DeBellis?
Yep, DeBellis.
DeBellis, gotcha. Jenifer DeBellis is with us, and she's a teaching writer and assault trauma advocate. Jenifer is the author of Warrior Sister, Cut Yourself Free from Your Assault, as well as Blood Sisters. She edits Pink Panther Magazine, an international women's art and literature journal, in its 12th year, and directs a aRIFT Warrior Project in Detroit Writers Guild. When she's not editing or doing stuff for others, which she is doing a lot of that, she's working for herself and writing some great stuff. Jenifer, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Kevin. I'm awesome.
I'm so glad to hear that. So are you ready for a new year?
Yes.
Absolutely. Are you tired of the old year?
I feel like it's been 2 years that, it's like, oh, so how's 2021 going to be? And it's like, well, wait a minute. We're not 2020 going into 21. It's only been 1 year.
Exactly. Now it's 2022, and, it's the first of the year, and a lot of people spend some time on New Year's Eve and shortly thereafter thinking about new ways of being, new ways of living, and trying to get rid of some of the things that have bothered them in the past and that they've carried with them. And you are an advocate for that for most women. And because, statistically speaking, I think we've talked about this before, you and I, 3 out of 4 women have had some sort of physical, mental, sexual abuse of some kind in their life. And it tends to go with them, and it carries through into many, many aspects of their lives. And it's time to be done with that, don't you think?
I do. Yes, absolutely.
How do you help people be done with that?
Well, so the title of the book kind of informs that. It's a metaphor. Cut yourself free from your assault. It's that idea of, carrying around the dead weight. And, I talk about it in my book. I don't want to get into that too much about how it used to be a form of capital punishment for murderers. And they would carry around, the dead weight of the person that they murdered. And I feel like when I was thinking about assault, and I was thinking about the trauma that many women carry throughout their life, especially the older the woman is who I speak with, the more that trauma is just expected to just be carried. It's like, that's I don't want to say a rite of passage, but it's almost like that's my lot. So that's the lot that I ended up in, and I've dealt with it, that way. But really, a lot of people haven't dealt with it. They carry around that dead weight, and they think that somehow it either has gone away on its own, or that they don't know that they can cut themselves free from it. And that's kind of what got me thinking about writing the book. And when I started looking at the statistics and I started touring around, I started noticing that there was a really young group of girls, particularly 14 to 24, who seemed to be struggling with it the most, because it was, often recent things that had happened to them in their life. And so they were really in the trenches of raw trauma. And I just started saying, you know what, this is our future. I want to see these women, these young women, become free of that and figure out how to get to that place, and they have to be a part of that. And so, I developed aRIFT Warrior Project first, and then came the book.
I want people to think about that for just a second. You just said 14-year-old girls on up, and I'm sure that there are some that are actually even younger than that, that have been abused by family members, by people that they know, people that they trust, and that it's just amazing to me that we live in a society where that is there, and then people say, well, okay, well, so that happened, brush it under the table, and don't think about it anymore, and you should be able to get over it, and stuff like, even if, or the people around them are in total denial that it's actually even going on, which is even a worse situation for the poor kid who has to live with that. It has to be frustrating for you to know that there are so many people that are dysfunctional in our society based upon things that happen to them.
It is, and you just brought up another thing too. I was speaking with a friend yesterday, and we were talking about the different trauma the different assaults that I have in the book. And I said, I picked a physical assault situation that happened in a high school. It was a boy had assaulted me in front of a whole bunch of students, like at least 150 people, and no one did anything. And a couple teachers saw it, and I carried that around, my whole life. And it was a couple of years before I got over that trauma, and the shame has never really left, because you can't get over that. It's horrifying to be assaulted, and it's amplified when people watch and they don't do anything, and you run into these people, later in life, and you're always in the back of your head. You're like, you were one of those people who saw that day and didn't do anything. And so we were talking about that, and he was horrified. He was like, well, what do you mean a teacher? What do you mean? And I said, oh yeah. And I told him this whole story, and I probably should write the book for that. And, just a nonfiction memoir kind of a situation. But he said, the teachers didn't do anything. No one did anything. Everybody just swept it under the rug. And I said, well, he was a football player, and it was right before playoffs, and they weren't going to do anything to their football player. And they found a loophole and justified it. And, so there's layers to the frustration. So it's not just frustrating to see it happen to other people. And, I got through it. So I am free of it. And sometimes when I go back and I think about it, it's more, I'm not dealing with the trauma of it. I don't really have any triggers that I know of that are attached to it. But I do get that frustration that rises up in me, because I say, I'm living, 30 years later, 32 years after this attack, and nothing has changed in our society. That kind of stuff still happens, even though we have systems in place. We had systems in place back then, and these things still happen. And adults who could be doing something don't do anything in the midst of it happening, or in the aftermath of it happening. They don't point people to the right direction. You get suck it up. Well, put it behind you, forgive and forget. And it's like, all these different catchphrases and things that everybody hides behind, and it maybe sounds good, and maybe they have good intentions. I don't know. I can't judge that. But, it's more damaging than helpful to, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I would say probably a majority of people, because that is the most unhelpful things that you can hear during that time, when you feel like you're invisible, and you feel like you're, full of shame and full of pain and full of all kind of other things that you don't even know. You can't even put a name on them.
I want to paint a picture for folks, just to let them know how horrific a deal that was for you, because there were 150 people surrounding you around this quote unquote fight between a football player. It just makes me sick and makes me angry. Yeah. A football player attacking a girl, and they're cheering, and people are egging people on, and they're saying, yeah, no, oh, get it. And teachers are just standing by, and you're there totally alone by yourself, having to deal with not only the shame of being attacked, but the fact that nobody, not one of 150 people, would stand up for you.
Right. And his girlfriend was, she was the only one trying to pull him off, and he was shoving her off as we was kind of assaulting both of us at the same time. And at the time, I didn't even know why he was assaulting me. And so just to be like, whoa, what, I don't even have a relationship with this person. what's happening. And, to think about that teacher, he didn't watch the whole thing. He walked by. I made eye contact with him. He saw it. I thought he was going into the other room to call or do something. And then the whole, hall cleared when the bell rang. Everybody ran, scattered to class, and I was left there standing by myself. And I was like, what do I do? And the same teacher walked out, and he goes, young lady, aren't you supposed to be in class right now? And it was just like, I mean, it was like if I had any trust left in me for adults, that was a really big blow to that trust. And then, what happened in the days to follow with the other adults who could have done something and did it was just, devastating. Even the local police. And it was like, and the loophole, just to put context to it, was I had left school. The friend who kind of started the whole thing by just talking about something that was way in the past, had said, do you want me to get you out of here? And I was like, yeah. Like, I wasn't going to go to the office at that point, because what are the adults going to do? Two or three of the teachers saw it happen, and just kept walking by. And so I left the school. And because I left the school, they were like, well, we won't suspend you, which is like a 3-day suspension, no credit for homework and stuff. And my grades were already kind of on the line. We won't suspend you either for doing something wrong. And it was like, that was the loophole. And it was just like, I just realized that I was lower class in that instance, whether it was, and I was a star athlete also. So it wasn't like I didn't do things like that for the school. I performed as an athlete, throughout my high school career also. And so it was like, wow. So if you're a girl star athlete, like, it doesn't matter. That didn't buy me anything. So.
Oh my Lord. It's amazing to me that something like that can happen. And you're a young woman. This has not happened that long ago. This isn't like the 1960s. This is,
Right.
or the 50s. This is I'm guessing 80s or 90s.
Early 90s. Yeah.
And that wasn't, by the way, folks. Now, it's like, gosh, in my preference, 1990 wasn't that long ago, but that was 30 years ago.
I know.
It seems to me like that's day before yesterday, but no, it's 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I guess the only thing that came out of that was any good is that it motivated you to do what you're doing today.
Absolutely.
Which is to help young women get out of, you can't necessarily help them from the situation that they find themselves in, but you can help them recover from it. And
absolutely.
And to get past it. And how do you do that? I can't even imagine. I'm a guy, and I've been in fights, and I was a boxer at one time, and I got beat up as a boxer and stuff. And I accept those things. But if you're a woman and you're getting beat up by a guy, how do you help other young women deal with the trauma? And there's no other word for it. Trauma is the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And there's no one formula. I wish there was a formula, because then you could just say, do this, this, and this, and you're going to be on the road. And so, coming out of high school, I immediately went into coaching, and I coached for years. So even as I was raising my own kids, I started big programs, after school programs for girls. I loved working with in the community with athletes. And as you do that, you work with young girls, no matter what age. You were saying, like, so I say 14 to 24. I had girls coming to me who were 9, 10, 11. And, and they were always like, a friend of mine. And I'm like, that's smart, right? Don't tell me that anything happened to you, because I have to report it. And so they would always come to me and say, if I told you a friend of mine, this happened to her, what would you say? And they started, so it was like the coaching became, it's like a big sister kind of a, big sister, little sister kind of a thing. And so I was immediately coaching other people on how to get past their trauma, and how to just, and part of that is just rebuilding yourself. And so, when you suffer an attack, and that's why I don't separate physical or sexual assault in the book, because as I've worked with assault survivors of all different types, of abuse victims also, there's a lot of the same types of trauma. And I know women who have suffered gang types of assault situations who've rebounded much quicker than a girl who got punched in the face by a guy, and so I don't want to, put a judgment on, which one was more severe or anything else, but I think we can all, agree that we look at the one case that obviously the magnitude of the violence that was committed against that person was far more than just, taking one blow to the face, and that trauma is different for every person, and the recovery, like how do you let go of that? How do you get past it? And so one thing, I say there isn't a formula, but I will say one thing that is super powerful, and I've noticed it through every person I've worked with, I noticed it with myself, and I noticed it in all the research that I've done in the last 3 decades, is rebuilding yourself. And as you rebuild yourself, there is no formula for that because everybody starts in a different place. Some people have no self-confidence, no self-worth. And then some people have a lot of that and it takes a blow or it completely erases it. And then everybody's starting at a different point, but they're always starting with the self. And so if you can start with the self and say, okay, what is it that, and sometimes it is creating barriers to protect yourself. Some people it's don't go around men like, okay, if you can't be around, men or the particular men who have, either allowed these things to happen to you or, we have a lot of adults who are supposed to protect us and try to protect us from these types of things, or the authorities or whoever else contributed to those things, then okay, take a step back. It's okay to put yourself in a little bit of a protective bubble to say, okay, just stay away from certain people, or even people in your family who say those things that are not helpful, and just get over it. And I thought you were already depressed and over it already, and it's like, well, yeah, now I'm pissed off. I worked through all of that. I'm through the shock, I'm through the pain, I'm through the depression, and now I'm angry, and you got to let me work through that. And so, and that's another thing, you have all these different grief stages, and it just depends on where you are and which one of those stages could be overlapping, because you could be depressed and angry, you could be in pain and depressed, and there's all these things, and you could still be, experiencing moments of shock, but you're already in the recovery part of grief. And so these things can keep coming back up, and some people have to work a lot harder to get through, particular things. You could have triggers. I know there's been instances for me where I was like, okay, I'm so much better. I'm over it. And then I start a new job and there's like toxic guy and he just triggers something in the workforce. And I'm like, and I don't know right away, we're not always experts in our own interactions and our own psychotherapists to say, oh, well, you did that, or you felt that way because this person did that. So sometimes you have to like come back from it and go, why the heck did that person just set me off? Or why did they freak me out? Or, whatever that reaction is that you're having, why is it triggering me back to this trauma? And then, hopefully then when you do have those things happen, you just, again, you've got to put in the work. No one can do that for you. So that's the one thing, is you have to go to self and figure out some of those things to rebuild yourself and get tools. I'm not saying like, I think therapy and group sessions and having great people in your life doesn't have to be just women. I've had some really great men in my life who have spoken really wise and compassionate things to me and have given me an opportunity to redeem, trust and faith in men. And those people were instrumental in my recovery. And it wasn't just like, one instance, it was all these different interactive relationships and things. And then there were things that were not healthy and were counteractive. And so you just have to go out there and figure out, and then be willing to say like, oh, that I tried it, but and everybody else says they love this particular thing, but that particular thing was not helpful to me at all. And you have to be willing to say, I'm not going to do that anymore, or I'm going to try it another time. But, so again, that's a self-reflection. I'm going to do it. I'm going to step back and I'm going to try something else. And it's sometimes a discovery of, what will work.
Question for you. Are you familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, so I reference her in the book, but go ahead.
Yeah, and she wrote the book 5 Stages of Grief.
Yes.
Do we go through that when we go through trauma? Is there the 5 stages of grief still present?
So yes and no. So I came up with 8 stages of grief because so in my book, I feel like some of her stages are kind of centered around losing a loved one. And
Right.
so there are things that, we have to go through, a grieving process for different types of trauma in our lives. And one of them would be losing somebody who's close to us. So we have to now try to figure out how to live without that person. And so her grief stages are centered on it. And she's actually changed them over the years because she's also done additional research. She's also worked with additional clients and psychotherapists and learned like, okay, maybe I'll adapt this a little bit. I think she bumped it up to 7. And so mine, I took some of them and combined them. And then I came up with other ones that were completely unique to, because you've got like, so she does, I do a couple of them, I pair them together because I'm like, these kind of work together. Like, shock and denial is often that first response that you have. Is like, oh, right, is this happening? And it's often not just the first response, but the initial responses in the trauma as it's being triggered. People are asking you to repeat, what do you remember? All these different questions. And it's just like, you just keep going through that. And then you've got, that moment of, okay, I'm, so hers are, I'm sorry, I'm looking at something and it's like distracting me. So hers are shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. And so some of those are, again, crossover. We all can say, okay, the shock and denial. I group those into one because I think they kind of keep playing off each other. And it was really hard for me when I started talking about it in the book to separate them. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to put these together as, this is one, and then pain is another, but the pain is different because you've got physical pain also that you don't have when you lose a loved one necessarily. And then you've got a lot of emotional and psychological pain. But then you also have this recall thing that happens that doesn't necessarily happen when you lose a loved one because you want to recall. You want to remember all those memories. That's a huge part of like outside of the trauma in the grieving is remembering, keeping that spirit and those memories alive. Where in this, you're recalling because you can't help it, but that can be helpful in some regards because you do need to deal with, is there something I need to take away from here? Is there something in continuing to remember this that I can help myself, even if it's just to identify what a trigger is so that I can learn how to navigate that trigger because we can't stop living in the world. So like I had to learn how to live around toxic men. And I say that like now it's a term, right? But I didn't know that was a term, but there was a very specific kind of, and someone just rose up yesterday and started being toxic on a Facebook post. And I was like, I don't even know you. And, I was like, hey, right, we didn't, because he was like, oh, I'm not a warrior, I'm against war, let live and let live. And he was commenting on my book. And I was like, clearly you don't know what the book's about. But I was like, yeah, well, about survivors. They have to become the warrior and the hero who saves their own shaken world. And they didn't invite the war that was waged against them in their body. But now they have to, right? They have to figure out how to live and let live while they also live and thrive in the healthiest form that they can. And I just thought that person, that was a recall thing for me over and over and over again. And I had to learn how to deal with that trigger because I couldn't go out into the world and live my best, healthy, confident life if that trigger was constantly making me shut down, making me embarrassed and ashamed, cower in a corner, leave an event, So for me, it was really important. Says that recall was really important. So I know it's a digression, but I wanted to kind of establish that. But then guilt and shame, which often comes with the recall. I group those together because they're not identical, but they seem to feed off each other and they get confused and interchanged. And then the anger, and then the depression, which is often like anger's hangover. It's like you have a sugar high and a sugar low. And then acceptance and hope, which isn't like, oh, I've accepted that bad things happen to me, which a lot of times in our current culture, that's what people say, is that it's this making peace with it and then a hope that you have a new future. And then I add the recovery part because I feel like you can't go through a bunch of stages and then like you end on hope. What do you do after that? It's like people saying, well, we'll just pray about it. Like, no, we have to do action. Like, okay, yes, obviously, let's, right? I'm a faith person, let's pray about it. But then it's like, then what am I going to do? like, what am I supposed to do? What are my next steps? And so I didn't want to leave it. I felt like as I was working with it, I was like, this isn't done. This is kind of like, it just ends abruptly. And so I came up with the recovery, saying that now you're taking these things, you have to have a plan. And sometimes that recovery is repeating some of the other trauma steps because they come up. So
they'll continue to get triggered for you back and forth like that.
right.
Well, you know, I have a friend. I'm going to say it. I have a friend, and this young girl was in a religion that is particularly in one way, and she lives in Salt Lake City. That'll give you an idea. And she was assaulted by family members when she was a kid, and it was not a one-off. It was a repeated thing on several people, and at the same time, they were considered revered men of God.
Yeah.
And she had to continue. I don't know how you do that. Continue to be around people that you know have assaulted you, are being considered revered for who they are presenting, not who they really are, but who they're presenting, and you have to deal with that. That has to be the most horrific thing I can imagine having to go through.
It is. And and that's another thing I was just talking about yesterday, actually. I love it when you have conversations that keep carrying over into new conversations. But so I was talking about this very thing, and I'm reading another book about Caste Society, and it's been super eye-opening. And I was making a lot of connections about within our culture about the hierarchy of, who has the power and what happens with that power, and how all the rules and the way the rules are enforced are imposed by that power, and they don't apply to the same levels in the hierarchy. And so it got me really thinking about the book and about my next book that I'm working on also. And I was thinking about how I had to go back and face these people at school also, so it was I had to go back. I had to face these people. I had to go to parties. I had to, at one point, one of my assaulters was in a close circle of friends of mine. And even when my now husband, we were going one time, and my friend said, hey, I just want you to know so-and-so is going to be there. If you don't want to come, I completely understand. She was much closer friends with me than she was with this other person. But she was like, I just want you to know, like, I totally get it if you back out. I didn't know he was friends with her brother and her older brother. And she said, I completely get it. And I was like, let me think about that. Because I was like, I don't really know how I feel about it. And I really didn't know how my husband was going to feel about it. We were just dating at the time. But I was like, what I don't need is my hot-headed husband to like beat the crap out of this guy. Although part of me would take a little pleasure in it. But this was a guy who was like, everybody just was like, he's such a nice guy. He's such a nice guy. Nobody believed he could do this horrible thing. And so, my husband knew all of this. He knew the whole thing about the nice guy, and I had made peace with it and everything. I kept seeing this guy over and over and over in the neighborhood. He was dating a girl that was like, I kept running into him, lived by my parents, and I was like, God, I can't get away from him. And so even after high school, I couldn't get away from him. And we go to this party, and I'm seeing, I'm just really nervous because I'm like, I'm not going to let him keep me back, I don't know. When you're a teenager and somebody hosts a party, you're like, I am not missing the party of the summer because, this jerk's going to be there. And I'm like, the place is big enough. I can dip out, whatever. Well, my husband is actually talking to him and everything else. And he actually said, he was like, yeah, there was a part of me that I wanted to just snap his neck. And, when we first got there, but he was like, I can see where everybody says he just really is a nice guy. And it was just like, right. And so I think what allowed me to go to school with these guys, and with the same thing, I've had conversations with young women and young girls who have been, molested and violated in their own families, and men of God, is that at a really young age, it was a woman in my family said, and she was a great woman of God. She said, Jenifer, you've got to be able to separate the man from his actions. If we look at anybody, and she wasn't dismissing abuse at this point. She was talking about something else, but it stuck with me. She said, one thing that someone doesn't identify their whole character. And I'm not saying that these men who are men of God who did this to this girl are that, but it was this challenge for me to say, okay, I'm going to look at someone and say, okay, are they a dimensional person? Do they have other qualities? You know, are they a brother, a friend, someone else's consensual partner, or whatever? And so I had to look at them as human beings. And there are times where I couldn't be around them. There are men who, like, I just left a church not too long ago because one of the guys was saying to me, and I was in a situation where I was alone with him doing a volunteer thing. And he said, well, he heard about my book and we're talking back and forth. And he goes, well, do you think there's forgiveness for the men who rape girls? And that's really weighed on my heart. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's confessing to me. And I'm like, I just sent my husband home because it was the middle of the night and I was waiting for my relief to come. And I was like, part of me was like, oh my God, I'm right. There are adults in the other room. Like, I'm not, and now I'm a different person now. You might try to overpower me and maybe you will succeed, but you are going to walk away with some marks, man, because I am not the same person. And so I'm like looking at him, I'm listening, and I'm just like, but then it just dawned on me that, here are men who, some of them have remorse. They carry that around with them. They never make amends. They never say they're sorry. And I don't know what that feels like. I don't know what that side of it feels like. And to be honest, I care about their humanity and I care about their trauma, but that's not my gig. And so I can't it's like, okay, God, you need to send somebody else for them because I don't want to inherit, because, like when you have empathy for other people, you carry a little bit of that, hurt in you. And I'm like, I don't want to feel that hurt. I don't want to walk through that if I don't have to, and then be on both sides of this. That to me is like, this is not a conflict of interest, but I was like, it kind of feels like a conflict of interest. I hope you make peace with those things, especially if it happened 40 years ago. But more importantly, that's not what my work is doing. And but it made me think about something too. You talk about the men of God, and it's just everywhere. Is that, imagine every room you're in that has men in it, like more than a handful of men. There are like past and present and future perpetrators in that room. That like if you allow it, it'll just make you just mortified and a little bit scared to navigate a room, thinking, oh, you're thinking, who in here can't be trusted or has done something horrible. And so for these people, I think, there's a lot of going back to reading this book about the caste system has really helped me kind of get a handle on thinking about these people who are heavily, are highly regarded as, these, stable pillars in our communities who do these horrific things, and some of them without consequence, and they have no remorse, and they'll do it again, and they've done it again and again. And I think that's the type, I think some of those type of men are what you're talking about for your friend. And I think that it'll take a long time to rebuild our system, and we've got to tear a few things down. And one of them is we cannot be bystanders. We cannot. And so that is the one constant. If I think about like that situation, darn well there were adults who knew about it. And when I think about, just think about the Nasser case and all of these athletes who are coming forward now and all the name dropping of all the adults. We're talking about an entire athletic community, not just a couple of people who enabled this guy. And it was somehow okay because these athletes were assets. They weren't human beings that deserved to not be violated because that was just par for the course, that we needed this guy or whatever. We need them. And so how do we, I don't know how to help those people per se, how they can navigate that room. I can say that I've been able to do that, and it just takes some horse blinders to just be like, I don't want to miss out, right? I don't want to have, what do you call it? FOMO. So can I put the blinders on and just go and enjoy some of the people and just totally avoid those people? And for me, that's been the case.
I don't think I've ever asked anybody this question, but I'm going to ask you because you're extremely bright, and I think that you maybe will have an answer for me. When you're talking about men, is it their sexual drive that overtakes them? Is it overtakes us? Is it our sexual drive? Is it our pain? Is it our anger? What is it that drives what otherwise might be considered a decent human being to do some of these despicable acts against women? What is the driving force behind that?
I think it's a cultural, like it's a few things that are weaved together, and I don't think every person has the same motives. But like if you ask somebody, is rape a sexual violation, and most people will say it's just about power, and I would argue that it's definitely about power. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like there's definitely that sexual component there when it is a sexual violation. So, if somebody's just, there's all different types of assault. So if somebody just physically assaults someone, roughs them up or batters them in some way, and there's no, evidence of sexual thing, then that we can say, right, that was someone overpowering someone else for a different reason. But if we talk about like the sexual violations that happen, I think a lot of things. I think, and this is, so both of my next self-help books kind of touch into these topics a lot more in depth. But one thing is, we have established rape culture. Not just, you hear people talk even in the church. It's very prevalent in the church. Boys will be boys. That came from the church. And
can I interrupt you right there?
Yeah.
Because there's something that just irritates the hell out of me, and I don't understand it. The evangelical Christian movement. Do you remember when Donald Trump was running for president? And he
Yes.
was in that
RV.
motorhome in the RV, and he was making statements like, "I can do anything I want, and I can kiss them, I can grab them, I can do anything that I choose to do, and there's not a thing they can do about it." And the evangelical people that they interviewed afterward were like, "Oh well, boys will be boys." And that in my mind that needs to go away.
And here's
thing. Go ahead.
No, you just finish what you're saying. Absolutely.
Because the thing about boys will be boy. I was an athlete when I was a kid. May not look like it now, but I was an athlete when I was a kid. I was in locker rooms from the time I was, I don't know, 13 to 25. I never, ever, ever, not once did I ever hear anyone talk like that. And if anyone ever did talk like that, they would be ostracized. They would be like, that guy's a weird mother. No. And we don't want to have anything to do with him because he's just freaking weird.
They would silently ghost him, right? They probably wouldn't call him out because they might be like, man, the guy's kind of crazy. He might be he might retaliate. But there would definitely be some private or public pulling away from someone like that. And here's, so that actual instance, I was actually talking to a couple of my students at one of the schools I teach at. So I teach face-to-face twice a week at Saginaw Valley State University here. And I was talking with a bunch of students. I teach this higher level mass media class, and we were talking about different things and stuff. And someone had brought that up, and they said very similar to what you were just saying and how he said that. And I said, I want you to meditate, because I teach argument writing and research writing, and we're looking at this through the rhetorical lens. I said, I want you to look at what he said. Let's break down what he said. I said, because I grew up, I was not very sheltered. I grew up and I heard men talk that way, sometimes to me. And I was very young. And so I learned to be a little graceful about it, to kind of expect it, that, guys are just going to talk that way around me, or guys are going to say those types of things to me. And I guess I should take it as a compliment that, okay, I'm right, comparable to those types of people. But I said, let's break down what he actually said, because I'm not offended by the thing he said that everybody's hanging up on. I'm offended or alarmed by the context that he attached to it, saying he was above consequence for that. And I said, we are all looking at the wrong thing. And if we keep looking at the wrong things, we're never going to fix anything in our society. If anything, we're just going to keep perpetuating the hate and the division between anybody who doesn't see that situation the same way. And by design, isn't that how the people who have all the power, that small amount of people who have all the power, they want us to be divided and talking at each other and never really getting at the root of things. So I'm like, you're right. Guys say really weird pornographic things. They pick up things that are from fantasy world or gaming world that are like, I don't even know why these things exist and why anybody would think that there's something desirable to be heard or repeated. But we have a whole culture of young men, same ages, 14, and I'm going to say 14 to 34, who have grown up with easy access to the most vulgar forms of entertainment that do not mimic, should never mimic how real life or real relationships happen, but that's what we get. So we get, the pickup lines that come from it, or the locker room talk that comes from it, and all the other things in between, which is another, right, alarming thing, problem. But if we don't look at the problem here, which is a man saying he has and he will continue to do whatever and have whoever he wants because he is the all-powerful person who can do that. So that was the thing I was hung up on. I thought that's the rape culture that we have allowed to cultivate in our culture. And it's not unique to the United States, but it is very prevalent in our culture. And I keep tracing back and I can't even find where it starts because it just keeps going farther and farther back. I mean, I'm at the biblical times at this point and I'm like, and here it is here also. And so we just need to identify what the real problems are. And I think it does come back to that power element and the lack of consequences. So if you think about my situation, which was, just the physical assault one, police didn't do anything. Principal didn't do anything. I didn't know there was a superintendent at that time. I probably could have reached out to them, but I probably wouldn't have because
how old were you? 15, maybe 16?
I was, I think I had just turned 16. Actually, I was not. I was still, no, wait. No, I was 16. I'm sorry. I was almost 17.
How can we expect as a culture, a 17-year-old kid to go against the quote unquote powers that be, to go above principals, to get the superintendents, to go and nobody's supporting her all the way through? How do we expect her to do that? And the other thing I wanted to ask you about before we have to go, because I'm becoming a firmer believer in this. I was reading an article the other day that said that porn is one of the largest industries that we have going right now. And more people are watching porn. Younger kids are watching porn. It's easier to get their hands on it. And 9 out of 10 presentations that are done by these folks presents violence against women.
And yes, and almost, let's see, just under 80% that they're reporting now are non-consensual situations. And people you can't just differentiate. So I mean, sometimes you could probably look at the screen and go, is she legal? But you don't know if she's being trafficked and she's being forced into these things.
Exactly. It's become, I'm to the point now where, because and I'd like your opinion on this, because kids are able to view it from their phones, and the phones are many computers that they can get on any site, or if they can't, their friend can. And if you block your son's phone, then he can go to his friend and he can, and so forth. I am to the point where I'm advocating where parents should sit down with their kid, with their boy, and watch it together. No matter how horrific that may sound, but to explain to him that it's not appropriate behavior. Do you agree with that, or is that too harsh?
Here's the thing. I think that no, I don't agree with it because I've actually had to distance myself. In the work that I work with sex trafficking and sexual exploitation survivors. And so I believe garbage in is garbage out, but I also believe that you can't unsee things. And I do not want to see those horrific acts happening. And a lot of times those are happening non-consensually, or there are situations of exploitation. So maybe there's consent, so the person can say, well, they're willingly doing this, but the situation isn't, pure. And I've had conversations with other people too, and they're like, stop attacking the adult entertainment industry. And I'm like, well, I'm going to attack it all day long, because there's more legal and ethical things happening in the industry than there are legal. And so
we don't know. We don't know how that child or that person got
right,
into that particular position, and then
right,
somebody throws a couple $1,000s at them.
right. But
And
it's a whole. I'm actually writing about it in one of my books, but it takes a lot of research, because just to give you the quick version of it, 3% of exploitation situations, it's less than 3, it's like 2.73% of those are the instances that we talk about, where we say, don't, be careful if you're out shopping, all these different things, abduction, and like taken. But that's less than 3%. So there's a whole 97% that is all about like how the system really works, how people actually get into the exploitation and get trafficked. And we're not even talking about it. So nobody even knows how to stop it, because nobody even knows how to recognize it. And yet, talking about accountability and the power dynamics, we're profiling and grooming kids and disposable human beings to filter into this system. And you've got people who are clergymen, principals, superintendents, teachers, all these different, the lunch ladies, all these people who are in on this kind of stuff, and it's affecting everybody, and everybody is a part of it or knows somebody who's a part of it. And it's devastating to think about, all the different things that happen that we can't stop because nobody's even looking at the right thing. And that kind of just blows my mind. It's like, why the heck do we keep doing that? It's just like talking about rape. If we keep telling girls not to walk alone in the parking lot, and less than 5% of those rapes happen that way, then we're not teaching them how to protect themselves from rape, if you can't even protect yourself from it, or any type of assault, because we're worried about the stranger, which could very well happen. But you know what? More likely than not, it's going to happen with the guy you're sitting next to that that you think is the best thing ever to hit your life, or your uncle, or your cousin, or somebody else. And so it's just like, if we're not going to solve anything if we're not looking at it the right way.
what is it, like 90% of rape victims knew their rapist? Some horrible number.
It's I mean, depending on what figures you look at, it's anywhere between like 90%, or some people say 89%, and now it's even upwards to almost 95% of those instances, even if they knew them as an acquaintance. So because now we have social media and we have different dating apps and things like that people meet on, and so that number is kind of climbing, because you can't call somebody a stalker like this. You can't equate them to the same person who's stalking you in a parking lot and shoves you into your car as somebody who you've been talking to on Tinder, or what's the other one, Bumble, or what some of these other ones.
I can't imagine going. Now I'm older and I wouldn't
I
do
know,
it. But
I can't either.
I can't imagine going on on a dating site and meeting a stranger in a place that, Ted Bundy did stuff like that when he would go to
Yeah.
he was around here in Seattle, and he used to go to. I remember hearing this on the radio, that they were looking for a guy in a Volkswagen that had a cast on his arm at the Sammamish State Park, and a girl came up missing. And it turned out to be Ted Bundy, and he was a good-looking, lawyerly type college student at the University of Washington, and he had this horrible, horrible dark side, which apparently, I'm sad to say, that more of us have that than we'd like to think.
Right. Although, yeah, not everybody kills their victims.
No.
But,
well, it
but
depends.
still,
It depends on what you call death. I mean, if what you do to somebody is so horrific for them that it affects every moment of their life until they're able to get together and work with you, you're able to help them get through it. That's a horrible thing, and people just say, no, just get over it. It's not a big deal.
Right. When are you going to get over it? Which is even more, because they're going to guilt you. So it's not just get over it, the whole suck it up. It's when are you going to get over it already? When are you going to stop punishing all of us? And you're absolutely right. That whole death, it can feel like you're Walking Dead. And I talk about that a lot. That theme is recurrent in Warrior Sister, Cut Yourself Free from Your Assault. And it informs the title because you can, and people go through their entire life. And I run into women all the time, and there are like women over 50, most women over 50, who look at me like I am the craziest woman they've ever met because I would dare to go around. I wrote a book about it, and I'm going around and I'm talking about it. One woman said, "You're like the sex education lady." And I was like, well, I could do that also, and the schools would benefit from me because we could reduce those pregnancy rates if we had the right talks with teenagers. But this isn't. It's not really sex education, but it is talking about difficult things. But somebody has to do it, and it doesn't make me uncomfortable. And I don't know why it doesn't make me uncomfortable, but it doesn't. And there's nothing that I love more than seeing people live again and be free, and to be able to be blessed to walk through that with some of them and to watch them slowly grow and develop that self-confidence. And it's just, it's wonderful to watch that and to know, like, oh my God, like I helped do that. I loved on them, or I was there for them, or I pointed them in the right direction. Sometimes it's just you're in passing and you're like, you know what? You should hit this person up.
Well, and I want to thank you on behalf of everybody, and especially the books that you've written, and the more books that you will be writing, because I think what you are trying to get out there, it's see, I do akin it to sex education. Like you've got some charismatic or some fundamentalist folks who say, no, they don't need to know, because if they know, they're going to do it, and if they do it, they might they get pregnant and stuff. So we want them to not do it until they are going to go get married. And do you remember that years ago, not that long ago, in the 90s, there was this promise thing that daughters were signing to their parents saying that I promised that I will save myself to marriage, and there was this little document that they did, and it was going around the churches and stuff. Well, you know what? That turned out to be nobody followed that document, because kids, it feels good. Kids are going to want to do it. Kids, I love him. He's the love of my life. She's all of 15, and she gets talked into doing something that so it's like
it's everywhere though, Kevin. It's everywhere. The shows. Have you ever watched? My kids were watching something. So all my kids were home. I have a 25, a 22, and a 20-year-old, and my 20 and 25-year-old were watching this series. I'm not even going to name it because I don't even want to give it glory. And they're like, "Mom, you can't see this. There's like explicit sex scenes in there, and they're showing body parts." And I was like, "And what's it targeted for? 14 and 15-year-olds." I was like, "How is this even legal? Like, I don't understand. If you ever watch some of these shows that are targeted for underage, like we're talking under 16, they can't even consent to having sex. How are you going to teach them not to do so? Not only are they thinking about what it is, somebody's showing them on the screen how to do it."
Exactly.
So they're not like, like when we were younger, it was like, am I touching the right way? Is that where that is? They have all these resources that are telling them exactly, this is exactly what you do. This is how you get them alone, right? This is how you confuse the adults. I mean, they have the whole narrative planned out for them. So you better be telling them how they can help themselves or protect themselves, or even in some cases say, you're moving a little too fast.
And feel good about it.
Like, it's really hard to grade against the system when everybody else in the mass media outlets are like, you need to start having sex. 14's not too soon.
But it's interesting. Times have changed so much. My dad, the closest thing that he ever got to a racy movie was like True Grit that John Wayne was in and stuff. Yeah. And one time we went to his house and we were watching and I didn't even think about it, but we were watching Titanic, because we said this is a really good movie and it's a great movie. Well, we came to the scene where he is sketching her.
Yes.
And of course she's topless, and my dad started blushing because he'd never seen that in a movie before. And I'm going, God, he would have. He's passed on now, but he would just be rolling over if he knew, because you see worse than that on a PG show on Netflix.
On the commercials.
Yes.
like even the commercials. There's like I was just on the treadmill and there's a commercial for a back-to-back like 3 different movies that are on, and when the lady opens up, she's having an orgasm and they're in the act, and I'm like, oh my god, this is. I was at 5:30 in the afternoon. I'm like, this is a commercial, and I'm like, and it kept coming on, every 5 minutes or 10 minutes that commercial, and I was just like, oh my god, that's alarming. Like that's what you picked to put in the commercial.
Yeah.
And then somehow that's okay.
So you agree with me, I think, that knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
And it should be age appropriate, but kids need to know what they're up against. I'll give you an example. My wife was a playground teacher in an elementary school, and she had a good relationship with the kids. And the 6th grade girl walked up to her and said, "Mrs. McDonald, can I get pregnant from anal sex?"
How old? Wait, how old?
Sixth grade. That would make her 11 years old.
Yeah.
And my wife didn't know what to say. It was kind of like, wow, I didn't. It's one of those real uncomfortable moments. But the reality is, those are questions that kids are asking at that kind of age, and we need to be forthcoming and honest about our bodies and about body shaming and sexuality and all of that stuff, so that the kids know. First of all, the girls need to know that a teenage boy, which is why I'm glad I did not have any girls. I had 2 boys. That the teenage boys are despicable in their behavior, and that's what they want, and they want it when they want it, and they'll do anything they can to get it. And you have to be very careful. And by and large, that's not everybody.
But I was going to say, but even going back to that, like that kind of builds on the boys will be boys thing. And I agree, like their hormones are going haywire, and definitely arousal's happening on all different sides. And they're trying to like that. That's when they're learning about their sexuality and stuff. And I think that those conversations definitely are important for to have with both boys and girls. And now we have transgender and gender nonconforming, and it gets more complicated with that also. And so I think you should, I always used to say, talk to them about it where they're at. So when my kids came to me and said, "Mom, what's sex?" Well, what do you think it is? I'd always deflect it back to see, like, where are they on it? So I know where I have to start in the middle of this. And I don't have to get into, like, how babies are made yet, right? I just have to, So in that case, my first reaction might have been like, well, where did you hear that? Or what do you know about that? And to try to gauge that. So, yeah, I think those are important conversations to have, and they put you on the spot. And it's a catch-22 also, because when you're an adult working in a school situation, and you're dealing with minors, there's all these roadblocks. And then you're like, well, gosh, if I say something and then it gets back to the wrong person, am I breaking protocol? Am I breaking the law? And am I supposed to report this to CIS? And is there going to have to be a document for this? And there's all this other nonsense, which again isn't even in place to help the kids. And so how do we navigate that? And it's complicated, but yes, I think we should have those conversations. Answering the question you said about watching the videos, I would say pull some of the dialogue out of that and review the dialogue. So no looking at the images, but say, is this how people talk to each other? Do you honestly think a woman wants to be talked to this way? And actually go through those types of mechanics, and even pull the sex out of it and just pull the relational things out of it, or the disharmonious relational things out of it, and say, does this seem rational to you? Do you hear anybody else outside of this talk that way? And what do you think would happen if you said that if you talk that way to somebody? You think it's going to get you somewhere good? And I think those would be good conversations. And I have had those conversations with teenage girls and young adults, because they're like, what's wrong with guys? They say these things. And I'm like, well, let's talk about where that came from and where they even got that idea from.
And it's until we get to the point where we are going to open up about it and say that there's certain things that are just not appropriate, and that
Right.
And it's under no circumstances is that the way you talk to a lady,
Right.
and until that becomes the societal norm, we are going to end up with what we have until we make changes. And I'm glad you're
Right.
working to do that.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you're not shy about it either. That's really good. Now I'm sure your boys told you that when they were teenagers. And,
Girls,
huh?
my girls,
Oh, you have girls?
3 girls.
Oh, 3 girls. So you've got all this. Did any of them come home I was just going to say that in talking about teenage boys, the first time they slow dance with a girl.
Oh God, yes, I've had those conversations. And then they're like, okay, they'll look at the girl and they'll say, okay, wow, this is really embarrassing, but please don't pull away from me right now. Can we just finish the song? Because that would be more humiliating if everybody else could see this also. Yes. And it takes us back to that. I get it. Hormones are raging and, those are uncontrollable things. I wouldn't say, I mean, most of the time they're uncontrollable things. And so it's a tragedy of puberty and growing up. And so, yeah, in that regard, I'm glad I wasn't a guy. I never had to deal with that personally happening. But yeah, so there's a lot of stuff.
I can tell you that is a very, very embarrassing thing to have to try and explain away. And then, and so then, it was like, well, did you enjoy your dance? She said, yeah. And she said, you're a little hopped up there, weren't you? And I said, oh, you felt that? Oh no.
Oh, that's even worse when you think you're pulling it up. Like, oh.
you think you're hiding it well enough, and it's like, oh no.
Oh no.
And my bills was bigger. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't go there. So
no, but it's those are the healthy things that we should be laughing about and talking about that kids go through, and they don't always and right, rewiring the narrative and how we talk to them about it. Just because you are aroused doesn't mean you have to act on that or fulfill it.
Well, exactly. And it's vitally important that you, even as a teenager, that you have a discussion with. As an example, I got together with a girl and we did the normal thing that teenagers do. And then she said, I'm not comfortable going farther than this because I don't want to get pregnant and I can't take the pill. And I don't, and I was 16, so I couldn't go get, in those days, this is the 70s. You could not get a condom to save your life.
Right.
So we decided, we made the adult decision to not go there.
Right.
And we had a 2-year relationship and everything was grand until it wasn't. But that's, so it is possible for kids to make an adult decision when they're a teenager, when they get the information that they need.
Absolutely. And to not put the pressure on each other to, or even the societal pressures and the community, the school community and the friend community pressures of, how far did you get? Blah, blah, blah. Like, first of all, none of your business. But, and those are right. But I have a lot of wonderful memories, from my own, being a teenager, similar types of situations.
Well, and I'll tell you, I was having a conversation in a car. We were in the front seat, and the kid I was talking to knew my girlfriend and me, and the kid in the back seat did not know my girlfriend. And I was telling her that we're not doing anything because this is our choice. And he came from the back seat and said, "Oh, she's some kind of prude, huh?" I said, "Stop the car." And my friend said, "No, I'm not going to stop the car." And I said, and he said, "Why do you want to stop the car?" And I said, "Because I'm going to beat the shit out of him." Is what I'm going to do.
And then I'm going to leave him on the side of the road.
Exactly. And he said, "No, we're not going to do that." And the guy said, "Oh, okay. I didn't mean that." And stuff.
But calling people out is a good start, and I think there's a divide. I think there's, my middle daughter, man, she calls everybody out. I'm like, you got to pick and choose. She's like, no, she calls everybody out. And then, I think that is another start too. When you talk about rewiring, it's just like standing up and saying, whether it's you personally or you see somebody else and you're just like, no, man, don't talk that way. And I find myself actually saying that also, to, because I mean, I'm sure like when you're old school, like a lot of this stuff is just so ingrained in people. They just say it, they blurt things out, and it's just like, and sometimes I'm more on hype because I'm like, don't talk like that in front of my kids because they're going to hate you more than they're, like they're going to be offended by the thing you said. That's right. In an instant, they're, it's coming on. They're actually going to start to hate you. And I value our friendship. So don't ruin the respect that my kids have for you because they're all adults now. So, anything goes in front of them. But I find myself, even when they're not around, thinking, but I don't want people talking like that in my world because I have those 3 daughters. And I don't want them to grow up and become my age and think, like, even when it's just so irritating or makes your skin crawl, like you don't say anything, you're like, what am I going to do? I'm going to be out of place. Like, no, shut up. Don't talk that way. And so I do find myself saying that, and I'm just like, oh, I'm probably people are going to be like, she's that woman. But
exactly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Jenifer DeBellis has been our guest today, and I could talk to this person for hours. I really could. She's really dynamic, and she's got a couple of books out, and she's got a couple more coming. How can somebody get a hold of you?
So you can find me at JeniferDeBellis.com. That's JeniferDeBellis.com. So just Jenifer with one N. And I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on all kind of stuff. I just went away. I just went away. So I'm on all types of social media on that name. And my book is available on Amazon.com. Warrior Sister, Cut Yourself Free from Your Assault. And, oh, lovely. Am I cutting out again?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, Mike, because the screen keeps cutting out. And it's also available on Barnes & Noble. And next Friday, I'm audio recording it. So it'll be available on audiobook probably in another 60 days or so.
Are you voicing it yourself?
I am.
Good for you.
Thanks.
And I hope you've got a good editor because that's the painstaking part. I've done them both, and it's hard.
Yeah, I've actually met. I toured the studio yesterday. Great guy. I'm really looking forward to it. He knows the stuff, and so worked with a lot of local Michigan and Detroit talent. So I'm really excited about it and have every confidence in it. But yeah, so you can find the book. You can find me. And I'm right now doing a giveaway. So I'm doing a giveaway to professionals who serve survivors. So hit me up if you know of somebody who could use the book. No questions asked. They're somehow, some way serving survivors. Tell me their name and what, if it's an organization or personally, and we're going to mail the book and I'm sending them out. So you can find a inquiry page on my website. And then you can send it to me that way. It'll email
Which is
me.
JeniferDeBellis.com. One N is the correct way to spell the name because my ex-wife used 2 N's and see what happened to her.
That was a wrong spelling.
That's exactly right. Before we go, is there anything that you would like to tell our audience now or in the future about anything at all? The floor is yours.
I just want to say to every person who supports survivors, thank you for the hard work that you do. And even if it's just listening to someone and, love on people. There's so much power in loving people back to loving themselves. So, that's probably the best advice I can give and just, be there, be a good ear.
You are awesome. And can we do this again?
Absolutely. I can talk to you all day too.
Cool. What we may do is, and stay here because I want to talk to you about coming on KKNW. I think you'd be very helpful.
Okay.
That's a live radio show in Seattle. So in any event, stay right where you are. I got to do this. I'll be right back. Thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of kmmedia.pro. Please visit our website, oddly enough, named kmmedia.pro, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind to each other because each other's all